This is understanding autism spectrum disorder in the secondary school setting. So what you're watching now is the definition, statistics and limitations video, and then 2, 3 and 4 will be the 3 core impairments of ASD, as they're often referred to, which is firstly social, language and communication, and then repeated or restricted interests or behaviours. 5 will be sensory challenges. 6 is all about recognition, classification and alternative spaces. 7 is about the pragmatics and the challenges at a secondary school setting for students with ASD. And 8 will focus on the typical profile of an ASD student in a high school setting. Then the last video will be suggestions in regard to teaching practice and a conclusion overall of what you've learned. So just quickly, why does this matter? Statistics suggest that ASD is on the rise. There's a number of reasons for that. There's also a small percentage of that which we're not really sure about at this point. We're not really sure why it's occurring. Obviously a large portion of it is due to diagnosis increasing and a growing awareness of it within the community, but then there's other factors that we're not entirely sure of yet. So just have a quick scan over the statistics. I won't go into them in great detail for a reason I'll explain just in a moment, but you can see that it's quite surprisingly a high proportion of the population, and especially true of the student population, and especially true of the secondary school setting that we teach in. Importantly, there's a 5-to-1 male to female ratio in regards to ASD, so that there is a much higher percentage of males with ASD than there are females. Whether this is a mistake or an error in at the diagnosis point, we're not entirely sure, but there is significantly more male ASD people than females. So the reason I didn't go over this in great detail is simply because, as McDermott, Williams, Riley, Glasson and Ray said in 2007, in the current time, the prevalence of ASD in Australia is not certain from existing data. So basically the data being collected, especially from the census, is not particularly good, and they rely a lot on reporting from the disability sector, which doesn't fully capture the data. So the statistics earlier, you'll see there are a lot of variation within them, and that's simply because the data set is not as complete or as accurate as we would like. What we do know, however, is that Australia is 7th in the world in regards to ASD within the population, and also that ASD has increased noticeably according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. So as you can see from reading here, in 6 years, the proportion has doubled. So whether that will continue apace or whether it will slow down, we're not entirely sure, but it is important to know about autism spectrum disorder as a result of these type of statistics. So as you can see from the statistic down the bottom, in 6 years the occurrence or the prevalence has doubled for autism spectrum disorder in Australia, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and we're not exactly sure why, or whether this will keep going apace or whether it will slow down or stop altogether, but it's important that we know what autism spectrum disorder is, as there will be an increase in autism spectrum disorder students in our secondary schools where we teach.